Everybody, I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Hollister Planning Commission on August 24th called to order. It is 6:01 p.m. This is a continuation of public hearing. Please note that the public hearing for the 400 San Benito Street Master Sign Plan 2024-1 that was published in the paper has been continued to a date uncertain and will be renoticed. Staff, can you please call the roll?
Commissioner Luke Corona,
Present.
Commissioner David Agaliotis,
Present.
Commissioner Hani Maizuni,
Present.
Chair Stephen Belong.
Present. I'd like to call Commissioner Agliotis to recite the pledge, please.
Ready? Salute.
This is the time for anyone in the audience to speak on any item not on the agenda and within the subject matter of the jurisdiction of the commission. Speaker cards are available on the lobby and are to be completed and given to staff before speaking. When staff calls your name, please come to the podium, state your name and city for the records, and speak to the commission. If you are joining us via Zoom, please click on the button on your screen to raise your hand. And if you are joining us via Zoom using a cell phone, please press number 9. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes with a maximum of 30 minutes per subject. Please note that state law prohibits the commission from discussing or taking action on any items that are not on the agenda. Staff, do we have any public comments?
We do not have any public comments.
Thank you. So we're moving to consent calendar.
Chair Belong, we actually have somebody who raised their hands as you were announcing the public comments not on the agenda. If the commission's okay with it, we'll go to her.
What's the commission's pleasure? It's fine. Yes, that's fine.
Hi, thank you for giving me the opportunity. My name is Jennifer Churchill, and I am calling regarding the designation of some property that my family has in Hollister. It was listed as mixed use, and it has been changed to commercial.
Ms. Churchill, are you
Yeah.
wanting to speak on the general plan update?
I have no idea.
Okay, so that's going to be later in the agenda. That's an item that's on the agenda, so we'll call on you for that later.
Thank you so much.
No
My
problem.
apologies.
Thank you. Okay, you can go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to August 22nd, 2024 meeting minutes. Is there an approval? So we have a motion on the floor.
And Chair Belong, would you please call for public comment on the consent agenda?
Oh, I'm sorry. Staff, do we have any public comments for the consent item?
We do not have any public comments.
Hearing none, do I have to entertain a new motion or?
Yes.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes from August 22nd, 2024.
I make a motion to accept the minutes as written.
We have a motion on the floor.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, ayes have it. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to commission business. Are there any nominations for planning commission chair?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion for the chair. I nominate you to be chair.
And Chair Belong, you'll
Yes.
also want to accept public comment on this item.
Okay.
But you can do that at any point during the item.
Okay. Thank you.
I second that.
I accept the nomination reluctantly, but I'll accept it.
If you'll just want to take public comment before the vote.
Okay. Staff, do we have any public comments?
We do not have any public comments.
So all those in favor of me accepting the chair, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? I guess I can't oppose myself, right? So ayes have it. Thank you everybody for your trust in me and in handling the chair. So we're moving on to public hearing. Do I go with public comments first, or do I open it up?
You go.
You can, but I was just gonna ask if the commission wanted to consider a vice chair as well as a chair. And as it's mentioned in the agenda, the intention is to just go for our next 2 meetings through the end of the year, and then as is written in our bylaws, we'll re-nominate in January at the calendar year.
Okay. Are there any nominations for Planning Commission Vice Chair?
I make a motion to nominate Commissioner Corona for vice chair.
We have a motion on the floor. Can we get a second? Can the chair make a motion or a second?
He can second it.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'll second the motion. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Am I allowed to vote?
Yes, you may.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we have a 4-0. Moving on to public hearings. May we have the staff report?
Yes, thank you, commissioners. Tonight's staff report for item 7.1 will be presented by Associate Planner Brendan Coy on minor subdivision 2024-1.
Good evening. So the item before you is a minor subdivision of the parcel at 2101 Burt Drive. That's the existing parcel. The proposal is to subdivide the parcel, the current existing 9.91 acre parcel, into 2 separate parcels. Parcel 1 being 5.91 acres, parcel 2 4 acres. And as part of this subdivision, no development is proposed. This is just a tentative map showing the division of the existing parcel into 2 parcels. So the project is categorically exempt per CEQA based on a minor land use division and being fewer than 4 parcels divided. No further environmental considerations or review is required based on the categorical exemption status. So we've got 4 options to choose from. The first one, adopt the resolution approving the minor subdivision subject to the findings, the conditions that are outlined in the draft resolution. You can adopt the resolution approving the subdivision with findings or conditions of approvals modified by the commission. You can deny the proposed project, or continue the hearing and direct staff to provide additional information. Staff does recommend Planning Commission to select option 1 for this item.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair, just one. You said this would be no development?
No
proposed?
development is proposed. That's correct.
Okay. That's all.
Staff, do we have any public comments?
We do not have any public comments.
Chair Belong, would you open the public hearing?
Sorry. We're opening public hearing at 6:12 p.m. And staff, do we have any public comments?
We do not have any public comments.
Thank you.
Chair Belong, the applicant is here tonight. Did you want to make a presentation? Yes? Yes. And just as a reminder, the Planning Commission and the City Council did accept the revised bylaws that were recommended by the Planning Commission. So tonight will be the first, but moving forward, applicants will be able to offer a 5-minute presentation and then a period for comments as well to this Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, commissioners. My name is Leo Spelt. I'm the CEO of Marge Confectionery. We are the owner of the parcel map that is being discussed here today. I would like to, first of all, thank staff member Kelly and staff member Coy for all their work on this. They've been very helpful in this long process. And I would also like to state for the record that we are in full agreement with their recommendations and their findings. We believe that the lot split would be very helpful to our company. Our intent, for your information, is to sell this parcel. We intend to reinvest in our existing facility as a confectionery manufacturer. And we haven't decided to actually go ahead with the sale, but we would like to have that possibility since we have no need in the medium term for this vacant land. We believe that other parties may have better use for this land in the future. But the proceeds will help us with the expansion and investment in our current facilities here. So that's by way of background. I won't bore you with any further slides or information, but if you have any questions for me, I would be happy to try and answer those.
Do we have any questions from the commission? Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you. And since we are a chocolate manufacturer, I did take the liberty of bringing some chocolates. They're on a table outside, so just as a small gift. Thank you again.
Thank you. So close public comment?
Yes, please.
Yep. So we're closing public comment at 6:14 p.m. So what is the commission's pleasure? What's that? You want to vote on? You can vote, or we can open it up for discussion. It's up to the commission.
Mr. Chair, I would like to, with no other comments, move to a vote if possible.
So is that your motion? Yeah. So we have a motion on the floor.
I'll second.
Okay. Okay. Are you ready to make your motion?
Miriam, if you could pull the last slide up, it has options for the commission if that's helpful.
I'll get it. Okay, Mr. Chair, I think I have it. Will this require a PC number, or are we going to read it as is per option one?
The Planning Commission resolution number, the next one will be Resolution 2024-11.
2024. Okay, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion approving resolution MS 2024-1, PC number 2024-11. That's correct. That we, subject to the findings and conditions contained in the draft resolution attachment 1, that we pass.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
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 And I'm an aye. Motion carries 4-0. Okay, we're gonna move on to informational reports. Oh, sorry.
Oh, we're on
We're on
7.
7-2.
Sorry about that. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Moving on to item number 7.2, recommendation to the City Council for the adoption of the 2040 General Plan, Climate Action Plan, Agricultural Lands Preservation Program, and Environmental Impact Report. May we have a staff report?
Thank you so much. Good evening. I am very pleased to present David Early from PlaceWorks, who is here tonight to discuss the City of Hollister's 2040 General Plan update, as well as our Climate Action Plan, Agricultural Land Preservation Program, and the revised final EIR. Also online from PlaceWorks from our team is Tammy Seal, who was leading the Climate Action Plan team, and Terry McCracken, who was leading our CEQA efforts in preparing the Environmental Impact Report. This is a long-term project that the city initiated back in February of 2020. And the city brought forward a general plan last year for a study session before the Planning Commission and Council. And at the September 11th, 2023 study session of the City Council, they directed staff and PlaceWorks to make some amendments that David will go over in more detail. But tonight, we are pleased to present the 3 documents and the environmental impact report for those 3 documents before the Planning Commission for your consideration, and making a recommendation for the City Council on their consideration of those documents. So without further ado, I'll pass it over to David.
Great, thank you very much. I'm David Early. I'm a principal and senior advisor with PlaceWorks. We have been the project leads for this project over the last 5 years, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening to be moving towards the final adoption of this plan. As Eva mentioned, we did prepare a final plan with an EIR about a year ago. When that came forward to the City Council elected not to adopt it and asked us instead to revise it quite considerably. What you have before you this evening are the revisions asked for already by the City Council. So to some degree, this set of issues has been vetted already, but of course we want to get your feedback, and ultimately this is scheduled to go to the City Council in November for final adoption. So I'm just going to run through the slides and explain the project to you and all its various components, and then I'll be available to answer questions, and my colleagues, Tammy and Terry, who are available online, will answer technical questions if you have any on their respective features. Could I have the next slide? Oh, I have a clicker. Look at that. I can do it myself. So I'm going to talk about all 5 of these items, the general plan itself, the climate action plan, the agricultural land preservation program, and the environmental impact report that covers all 3 of those. And then I'm going to give a few final comments as well, and then open it up for your questions. For the general plan, many of you know, of course, that the general plan is overall what the state courts have called the blueprint for growth and development within any jurisdiction. Every jurisdiction in the state, whether it's a city or a county, has its own general plan, and it is the document that establishes your overall vision and supporting goals, policies, and actions to give a consistent direction for future development, hopefully balancing growth, conservation, and quality of life, and also documenting baseline environmental conditions so you can track those as things change over time. So that's what the general plan is overall as it affects every city and county in the state. The general plan is required to have a series of what are called elements. It's a kind of funny word that really means chapters. The reason they're not called chapters is that you can combine them in any way you like. They don't have to be in individual chapters, but you do have to cover all of these topics. So your general plan already has these six chapters that cover seven issues. First is land use and community design, circulation, housing, natural resources and conservation, open space and agriculture, and then health and safety, which includes both the legally required safety element as well as the legally required noise element. So 7 there. There is also within your existing general plan a community services and facilities element that's not required by state law, but which you already have. And we've been asked by your city council to add 3 new elements as well, which are the arts element, the economic development element, and a legally required environmental justice element. So what you have before you this evening is a total of 10 individual elements covering actually 11 items if you look at health and safety and noise separately. All of this document was last updated in 2005, and so it's high time for an update, having been almost 20 years since the last one was adopted. The City Council gave us a number of pieces of direction when we met last year, and the first of those was to make an expansion of the city's sphere of influence, which is the area that the city believes that it will annex in the future. The previous draft general plan had a quite constrained sphere of influence that did not foresee significant annexations and new development around the edges of the city. The City Council asked that we expand that, particularly on the northwest above Buena Vista and Wright Road. And I believe I have a pointer here. Well, it doesn't point on the TV screen though, but it's a parallel to Buena Vista and Wright Road on the northwest side of town. There's an expansion there, and then there's also an expansion along Fairview Road going to the east of the city. Areas have been added to the sphere of influence in those areas as requested by the City Council. And so overall, the development areas within the city would include both those areas to the east of Fairview, north of Buena Vista, and also some more limited areas down on the south side around Union Road and on the far west side near the sewage treatment plant as well. We were also asked to add requirements for specific areas that would require specific plans in order to be developed in the future. And you see 5 of those areas here on the map. There's only 4 sets of words on the left side of the slide. We have the Buena Vista area. East of Fairview Road, we actually have 2 different areas that you see in what I would call purple and light blue. And we were directed to add these to Fairview Road area, but of course the Santana Ranch development is already there. And so we have 2 separate specific plan areas to the north and south of Santana Ranch. And then we have an area in the southwest that's shown in pink on this map, and an area around Union Road that's shown in green. The council directed that the general plan should come back with allowances that those areas can be developed, but with requirements that each of those 5 areas would need to have a separate, detailed, specific plan developed for it before development would occur. So that is mapped in the general plan and has policies regarding those development requirements within the new general plan that's before you. The council also asked that we accept several property owner requests that were made at the time that the general plan was looked at last year. You see them all on this map. The council requested that we change an area along Buena Vista Road from high density to medium density residential, at Chappelle and Santa Ana from high to medium also, and at Glenmore Drive from high to low density. You see those all on this map. And then in the Meridian Road area, they asked that we change from residential estate to a mixture of medium and high density residential. So those are changes that did not exist in the previous general plan as a draft and are now included in this draft that's before you as well. We also updated the North Gateway commercial designation, which already exists in the general plan today, to allow not only commercial uses, but also residential uses. We added an action in the arts element to prepare a study for a potential public art fee. And at the council's request, we changed the policy language about an agricultural land preservation policy from 2-to-1 mitigation to 1-to-1. And that is to say that it was in the general plan that for every 1 acre of agricultural land to be developed, 2 acres would be preserved. That's been changed to 1-to-1 so that for every 1 acre of development, 1 acre would be preserved. Again, all 3 of these items were ones that were requested by the City Council and that are now in the document before you. So this is the revised land use map. It is otherwise very similar to the one that was presented a year ago. It does include those 4 changes that I mentioned along Santa Ana Road and in the Buena Vista. It has the larger sphere of influence. It has the specific plan areas. And you can see in the general plan map, the specific plan designation is that purple color surrounding the city. So this is the land use map that you would be accepting this evening if you choose to do so. The specific plan the general plan does also include a series of illustrative concepts for the specific plans that are to be prepared. These are 2 of those 5 illustrative concepts. I want to really underscore that these maps are not intended to be definitive. They are only to create a set of parameters for evaluation in the environmental impact report, and they can be modified when specific development proposals are brought forward through the specific plans themselves. So for each of the 5 areas, there is a concept drawing. These concepts were needed to meet EIR disclosure requirements, but they are non-binding and they will be fine-tuned through the specific plan process. The general plan does also include changes to land use designations. The existing general plan is shown in the middle column here, and the changes are in the right-hand column. This set of changes, these are the same as what you were looking at last year, but they do include changes to make more continuity among the designations so that there aren't gaps in the numbers, and also to provide somewhat more robust densities so that you are able to fulfill the much needed housing needs in a more concentrated area and without using large amounts of agricultural or other undeveloped lands today. So you can see those new proposed densities in the right-hand column. That's it on the general plan. I'm going to move on now to talk about the Climate Action Plan. The Climate Action Plan is a strategic plan required now under state law to reduce Hollister's community-wide greenhouse gas emissions and to increase resilience in the face of climate change. It's a document that's intended to support development and procedures under the general plan, and it includes a quantification of both current and future greenhouse gas emissions. It sets targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which are in keeping with targets put forward by the state of California, and it includes strategies to reduce those emissions to get down to the targets and thereby meet the state's 2045 emission reduction targets. The Climate Action Plan is based on the idea that emissions are going up all the time in Hollister, in California, and around the world. I think we're all aware at this point that global warming and extreme climate events are becoming more and more commonplace. We had the 2 massive hurricanes in Florida and North Carolina just recently, which most people do understand to be caused by climate change. We have more and more extreme heat events. We have more and more wildfires. All of these are aspects of climate change. And so the state of California is trying very hard to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in order to do what it can to combat climate change around the world and across the country. In these graphs, you see how over time, from 2005 to 2019 and moving forward into 2030, 2040, and 2045, left to our own devices, we would continue to create more and more emissions. You can see those emissions going up in the bar graphs on the right. And the gold line running from 2019 downward shows what we need to do in order to meet the state goals and in order to do what we can to offset climate change. So rather than that upward curve that you see in the bar graphs, what we're trying to get to is a lowering that you see on this with this gold line. To do that, the state has established a statewide goal of achieving what's called net carbon neutrality, that is essentially zero net greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2045, and this means reducing actual GHG emissions by about 85%. That means carbon neutrality being a state of balance between the emissions released and those that we're able to remove from the atmosphere. There is some removal that can actually happen, so we don't have to get to 100% elimination, but we do have to make very significant eliminations down about by 85%. So the Climate Action Plan has a whole series of strategies in it that the city would implement to reach those goals. It identifies 8 separate sectors that you see on the right on this slide that includes energy, transportation, off-road equipment, solid waste, wastewater, natural resources, and governance. And in each of those sectors, there are a series of strategies for a total of 33 individual strategies. Each of them has a set of actions, performance assumptions, and indicators, and they all include both mandatory and some incentive-based measures as well. And here's the results of this come out that you can see again that red line at the top. Oops, very similar. Man, I just used the wrong thing. I won't try and point because that's what I just did. The purple area and the red line that you see at the top, this is what we call business as usual performance. If we did nothing from here on out, we would see a steady increase in emissions. The state is already taking actions that are going to take care of the area in purple, which you can see will almost keep emissions at a flat rate from today. This is just based on state efforts that are already in place. And the Climate Action Plan will help Hollister to do its part to make up the remainder of that amount, which is the area covered in blue that takes you not only from essentially no net change down to an actual reduction and meeting the 2045 target. So by implementing those 33 strategies in this Climate Action Plan, you would be able to do your part to meet the state's requirements in terms of greenhouse gas reduction. And that's it on the Climate Action Plan. Again, I am happy, and my colleague Tammy Seal is happy to answer any questions you might have about that once I'm finished. I'm now going to talk about the third part of this overall package, and that's the Agricultural Land Preservation Program. This is a part of your zoning ordinance that once adopted would go into the zoning ordinance and require the preservation of farmland in exchange for development. Its intention is to partially offset the loss of agricultural land as urbanization occurs. It would protect some farmland from urban development and preserve this land through agricultural easements, which are legal binding agreements under which the land would remain in agricultural use. We require now a 1-to-1 preservation ratio. As I mentioned in the previous draft, that was 2-to-1. The council asked that that be lowered from 1-to-1. So what it says is that for every 1 acre of land to be developed, 1 acre of land must also be preserved. And that preservation must occur within Hollister's defined planning area, which is defined within the general plan by policy in the general plan, and it is the dashed line on this map. Again, I wish I could point at it, but I can't. But it is the dashed line at the far outside. It does go through the purple areas down on the southern area, both the southwest and the far east. You can see that dashed line going around the city through some of the purple and then up along the airport and around the north side of the airport as well, and then following down on Highway 156 actually at the city's western edge. So that's the planning area in which that 1-to-1 preservation would need to occur. There are also other requirements that the land to be dedicated must be in active agricultural use or be able to be brought into active agricultural use within a year, and it has to be served with a water supply sufficient to support some type of agricultural use, which can include grazing, but it does have to have water to support its agricultural uses. So that's it about the Agricultural Land Preservation Program. I want to talk now about community input that we've received on these documents, and then I'm also going to talk a little bit about the EIR. In terms of community input, we have received a series of letters, which you have in your packet. 2 letters were received that I will not be talking about tonight because they were received this morning. One was from Mr. Siwak and one was from San Benito County. I'm available to talk about those with you if you have questions about them, but they were received so late that I don't have slides about them. They're not part of my formal presentation. But I am able to otherwise talk about public involvement that's happened and the letters that were received up through last week. There have been multiple opportunities for public involvement in this process. Over the last 5 years, we've held 10 workshops and events, several online activities, 8 meetings of a general plan advisory committee, 4 planning commissions, and 6 city council meetings. And I might mention all of that happened, most of it through COVID, when meetings were very constrained, but nonetheless, we had really excellent participation, largely online, but still people able to attend and give feedback about the planning process. We also have had a very robust website for the project at hollister2040.org. You can still go to that website, download the documents, and look at public comments that have been received, background information, and so forth. And that's been a very important part of our efforts to make sure the public was engaged in this process. We have received a number of comments since July's publication of the general plan. We got one comment letter that did not request any changes. I won't talk about that one further. We got a second comment letter that asked to have the area at the corner of Hillcrest and Fairview designated for mixed use instead of commercial. This is a site that we believe very strongly does need to be set aside for a commercial shopping center on the far east side of town. There is no such shopping over there right now, and both staff and the previous Planning Commission and City Council were all concerned that a mixed-use designation might result in residential development on that site, which would take the site out of the use of possible use in the future as a shopping center. And again, that a shopping center is needed on the east side of town as development happens over there. So although that comment was received, staff is suggesting that you leave the designation as is, as commercial. Another comment was received about the specific plan designation, stating that it would delay the ability of individual property owners to develop their parcels and would increase development costs. The Planning Commission and City Council have already previously conducted discussions on this and have concluded that specific plans are the best method to ensuring that there's well-coordinated, high-quality development in new growth areas, and that it's not an arbitrary or scattershot approach to individual developments as individual parcels might move forward. So staff and consultants do feel, and your commission has actually already concurred, that it makes sense to have this specific plan requirement in place. Another comment stated that the Agricultural Land Preservation Program area should include the entire county and not just Hollister's planning area. The City Council did actually already previously consider that request as well and elected to maintain the area at the boundary of Hollister's planning area in order to ensure that the preservation is actually having a direct effect on Hollister's environs and that it's not way farther south in the county where that agricultural preservation may actually make no real impact at all on things here in Hollister. So that was the council's reason to keep the boundary at the planning area boundary. We have had several comments also about specific policies, land use 1.5, 1.6, and 1.7. The first comment about 1.5 stated that it was illegal to preclude applicants from filing an application for annexation. We looked back at that and realized that we probably had erred in using the word accept. The city cannot refuse to accept an application, but it is perfectly legal for the city to put a policy in place saying that it would not approve such an application. So we are suggesting, and we have changed in your documents, that the word accept is changed to approve, as you see in red here, and we do appreciate that comment that came into us, so we've been able to address that. The commenter also suggested that policies 1.6 and 1.7 were against state law. We do not agree with that finding. The state law does not specifically require coordinated annexation, but there's nothing in state law that precludes coordinated annexation. So the fact that the city would be putting in place policies that are looking towards coordination of annexation and looking for orderly development through specific plan processes, there's nothing in state law that makes that illegal. We don't believe that the commentor is correct, and we don't believe that you need to take further action in that regard. And then there was also a comment from that same commentor about policy land use 1.9, stating that it was very vague and that it would be dependent on how the word irregular is interpreted. The policy states that you would prohibit annexations of land that are not contiguous, and that you don't want annexations that would result in county islands or irregular city boundaries. It is true that that word irregular is one that your commission and ultimately the city council will need to interpret upon individual applications, but that's very common in general plan language. This is creating a policy framework for your future actions, and there's nothing illegal and nothing too vague about it, it's perfectly fine for you to accept that policy. Next one is about action land use 1.1. The commentor stated that this action, which says that the city will work with the San Benito County LAFCO to amend the sphere of influence, that is actually a necessary action, we believe. You could not make annexations unless your sphere of influence was expanded. Expanding the sphere is necessary before annexations can occur, and so we don't agree with that comment, and we believe that you can keep that action as is, and in fact you should keep that action as is to state that you'll be moving forward with that change to the sphere. And then a couple more on individual parcels. We had a comment stating that this area along Hillcrest should remain at 8 to 10 units per acre. The general plan is now looking at up to 60 units per acre in order to create additional housing opportunities. The Planning Commission and City Council have actually already received this comment. They've already reviewed it and found that a high density designation is appropriate in this area due to its location, being next to a proposed shopping center, and needed in order to meet the city's housing needs. So this is a site that we believe should remain with that proposed density of up to 60 units per acre. We also just on Friday of last week received one final comment letter about the site near the corner of San Felipe Road and Santa Ana Road. As you can see on this map, it faces both of those two roads, although it's not right at the corner itself. The property owner was concerned that the allowed density under the mixed use designation of 30 to 65 dwelling units per acre would make his desired project infeasible. My understanding is that the desired project that you see there is about 20 units per acre. But we do believe that a mixed-use project with higher densities is appropriate at this very centrally located site. We believe that the site is actually already now designated in your housing element, so a change would require a housing element revision as well, and you'd probably have to look for other sites to replace it. And your Planning Commission and your City Council have actually already reviewed this site as well, same comment in a previous round of comments, and made a decision not to change. So although you have that letter again, it's a second round of the same issue, and one we believe can be left as it is. Needless to say, any of these comments, if you want to come back to them, we can answer more questions. And if you do want to make changes tonight and your recommendations to the City Council, you are welcome to do so. So now I'm going to go on to the environmental impact report, which will be almost the last part of this somewhat long presentation I've made. For the environmental impact report, I think you all know that the EIR is prepared under the California Environmental Quality Act, which is the state's primary environmental protection law. The EIR is an informational document that discloses potential environmental impacts. It identifies needed mitigation measures, and it describes feasible alternatives to the proposed project. Once you do what's called certifying the EIR, that is not the same as approving or denying a project, such as this general plan, but you cannot act on the general plan until you first certify the EIR as an adequate understanding of environmental impacts. So both you and ultimately the City Council will first consider certification of the EIR. After you make that certification, you will then consider whether to approve the general plan or not. The EIR process you see here, it includes a notice of preparation and a scoping meeting, then creation of the draft environmental impact report, that's where it says environmental review, and that's subjected to a 45-day public comment period. After the comment period ends, we prepare a final EIR that includes responses to all the comments received. Those are done in writing, and that final EIR is before you now. You, as the Planning Commission, then consider the draft and final EIR together. You would recommend certification to the City Council, and ultimately, as shown on that last step here, the City Council would certify the final EIR and then act on the project itself. The EIR looks at a total of about 16 topics that are all required under state law. You see them listed here. I won't read them all off, but they're here in alphabetical order, and you can see that it's a very comprehensive list of all sorts of environmental issues that we face here in the state of California. In the case of this document, what we need to do is first look for environmental impacts and then try and avoid, minimize, rectify, reduce, or compensate for them. In this case, the general plan incorporates a whole host of mitigating policies and actions that are already lessening the impacts that might have occurred. And in almost all cases, the general plan is what we call self-mitigating, which means that the policies and actions in the general plan itself will avoid potential environmental impacts. There are a few exceptions to that rule, but generally speaking, the general plan itself mitigates the potential environmental impacts that it might have created. So those impacts that were found to be less than significant because of the policies that are already in the draft general plan are listed for you here. As you can see, there's a total of 9 of them, if I'm doing my math right, and they are aesthetics, energy, greenhouse gas emissions, hazardous materials, hydrology and water quality, land use and planning, mineral resources, population and housing, public services, utilities, and wildfire. In all of those, the general plan could have had a potential impact, but it mitigates its own impacts through the policies that are in the plan itself. There are a few 3 topics that needed some additional mitigation, which has been included in the plan. Those are biological resources, cultural and tribal resources, and geology and soils. And then perhaps most importantly, there are what we call significant and unavoidable impacts in the 4 topics you see here: agricultural resources, air quality, noise, and transportation. In each of those, we do find a significant impact. There will be conversion of agricultural land. There will be air quality emissions that exceed those foreseen by the Monterey Bay Air Resource District. There will be construction and operational noises, and there will be transportation impacts in vehicle miles traveled that exceed those foreseen in San Benito County as a whole. So in order to approve a project that has these significant and unavoidable impacts, you need to first have studied whether further mitigation measures are available. You have put some mitigation measures in place, but they're not sufficient to avoid the impacts. And then you have to make what's called a finding of overriding consideration to say that you understand those impacts and that you're adopting the project nonetheless. So the final EIR has now come out with all those findings in it. It was published last week on October 18th, and it includes the comments, two sets of comments, I should point out. We have responded both to comments that were received on the 2023 draft EIR and comments received on the 2024 revised draft EIR. So it's a very comprehensive document. It doesn't matter when a comment was submitted. We've responded to all of them, and we've made changes and corrections to the text of the revised draft EIR to reflect any changes that were needed. And so the final EIR will consist of the revised draft EIR issued in July of this year and the final EIR issued on October 18th. Comments were received on both draft EIRs, of course. They came from a number of government agencies where you see the ×2. That means that agency submitted comments both times on both documents. We have 2 sets of comments from the Highway Patrol, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, just 1 set from Caltrans, 2 sets from AMBAG, the Association of Monterey Bay Area Governments, 1 from the Air Resources District, and 2 from the High School District, and 11 comments from private individuals who submitted comments as well. We've responded to all of those and made necessary changes in the document where needed. Some of the concerns that they mentioned were about proposed transportation improvements and traffics, the Monterey Bay Air Resources District regulations and attainment status, and we made some minor corrections based on that comment letter. Some concerns about biological resources, development and municipal services in the Buena Vista Specific Plan area, requests for modifications to land use densities, and most of which we've already talked about, concerns voiced about the cost of this process, which is not really directly a CEQA comment, but one we had to at least acknowledge since it came in the form of a letter about the EIR, and then the capacity of PG&E in North Hollister and future groundwater supplies. There were also a few comments that asked for clarifications of the text, and we've made those as well. So that's it for my presentation, other than just to let you know that tonight we're hoping that you will ask questions, allow me and Tammy and Terry, as well as Eva and Amber, to answer any questions you have, take public comment, propose any additional changes that you would like to see, and then to move this along to the City Council for a hearing on Tuesday, November 19th. At that hearing, there would be EIR certification and then review and hopefully acceptance of the general plan, the climate action plan, and the agricultural land preservation program. Then once that action happens on November 19th, they will be in place and we'll be putting together final documents as the public record, and that will occur in November and early December. So that's the end of my presentation. I can stay up here for a few minutes if there are immediate questions, and otherwise I'll take a seat again. You'll take public comment, and I'll still be available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair, I did have a few questions.
The floor is yours.
Earlier you spoke, though, about the 1-to-1 acre preserve. Can you go over that one more time? Because I didn't catch quite if it was going to include all of the sphere of influence or if it was just designated areas.
The requirement, so there's 2 parts. There's when are you required to mitigate or preserve land, and where can that land be preserved? So the first part, where is it required? It's required for any development that happens in the existing or future corporate limits of the city of Hollister on existing agricultural land. And agricultural land is defined in the ordinance. It's crop production, it's rangeland, it's any land that meets any requirements as prime agricultural land or land of regional or local importance, and that's all spelled out in the law. So any time that any land like that is converted to an urban use, it would trigger the need for preservation. So then the second part of your question is, where can that land be preserved? It has to be preserved inside of Hollister's planning area. And that's that area that extends a half a mile to a mile outside of the city today. We don't have the map up anymore, but it was on one of your slides, and it is the area. It's shown in the general plan, and it's all of the area that includes both the city itself and the area roughly half a mile to a mile outside the city itself.
Well, and I think you might have touched on my second question, was just to define again what an active agricultural use was. So I think we're good.
Yeah, great.
That's all.
Any further questions from the commission?
I have a couple questions. You talked about high density being 60 units per acre, correct?
That's right.
Do you have any idea on how many floors that would be?
You can achieve that depending on the nature of the building. It tends to be a 4 to 5 story building.
Okay, and do you know, I mean, not you, but staff, do we know if the fire department is capable to reach that high?
Yes, we have existing buildings. Our the existing building, the Baylor, and the downtown 4-story buildings. So yeah.
Thank you. And then going back to greenhouse gases, what are the plans to reduce them? You give us a lot of bar graphs. What are the plans to reduce it?
Well, as I mentioned, there's 33 strategies, and each of them have specific actions. Tammy Seal is online and available. And Tammy, if I could, I'd love to call on you to give maybe 3 or 5 examples of some of those specific actions that fall under the 33 strategies. That's Tammy there behind the blue screen, in front of the blue screen.
Good evening, Tammy Seal with PlaceWorks. So, yeah, as David mentioned, the Climate Action Plan includes several strategies that within each of them there are actions recognizing they need to be implemented over time. And they've been prepared to be consistent with the general plan as well. And so the strategies include actions that the city will take to reduce the emissions the city is responsible for. So those are commitments that new city facilities will optimize energy conservation and efficiency in their performance, and include actions to retrofit like streetlights and traffic lights with LED fixtures. That's an example of what a city can do, and that's in the Climate Action Plan. And then there are also strategies that are focused on new development and strategies that are focused on existing market rate and below market rate homes, recognizing, there are opportunities for each of those. So most of these are related to how energy is used to ensure that energy will continue to be used efficiently and that it will come from carbon-free sources, so mostly renewable energy sources over time. And then a big part of the Climate Action Plan relies on reducing emissions related to transportation. And so that includes ensuring that there are more electric vehicle charging stations throughout the community, that the city's fleet transitions over time to carbon-free modes as feasible. And again, that there's greater community use of efficient use of water is a part of this as well. So there are several strategies. I'm happy to go over all of them, but many of these are also supportive and the continuation of many of the regional programs that have already been effective to ensure efficient use of energy and increased use of renewable energy in the community.
Great. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you. No more questions.
I do have one question. I don't want to create more work for you, but I do have a question. I'm very curious about, from a business point of view, the idea of one-to-one and the idea of increasing the number of units per acre. You're really going to bring more people in, okay? So, but at the same time, you are losing farmland. So when you look at it from a business point of view, so it would be nice if we had some kind of study to show the advantage of doing this approach. For example, because we're gonna lose some farmland, right? Because we're gonna annex some of it for the city. So what's the decrease on the economics over there versus what the economics would be higher, of course, because now you're gonna bring more people, more business, you're gonna bring in more economy, it's gonna flourish a little bit more, right? It's gonna go up one level. So it would be nice if there's a study showing the what we're doing here versus what we're doing there, and really, showing the advantage of how we're doing that, just from a business point of view, I'm thinking.
Right. Okay, well, thank you for that comment. I certainly understand what you're saying. It's not something I could do this evening.
No, of course not.
We have been at this for 5 years, so I am hopeful that you all will see fit to move this forward, but you could ask that we stop. I mean, I think the study you're talking about would take 6 months to prepare at the least, so I would not recommend putting that additional step in, but one could do it. It's true.
It would be nice to see it one day. But yeah, it's not gonna be a showstopper for this.
Right.
And I would also add to Commissioner Maizuni that the city has added an economic development element to the general plan. So while the general plan itself is not a detailed economic study, there was an economic analysis prepared by Bay Area Economics as part of this to help build the strategies in that economic development plan. And so there are policies and actions to support economic development in all sectors, including our airport, agricultural, economics, tourism, all of these things to further those economic sectors for the city, both through policy-wide things, just generally supporting those things, but also very specific actions about taking some of those actions following
you.
the adoption of the plan.
Any further questions? No? I just had a few. So in the plan or within our city limits, there are lands that are Williamson Act protected lands, correct? And those aren't going to be affected in any way, correct?
The general plan does not by itself remove a Williamson Act contract. It is quite possible over time that Williamson Act contracts would be canceled or non-renewed, and then the land would be developed. And particularly inside the existing city limits, I think it's quite reasonable to assume that any contract that's not already in non-renewal would go into non-renewal at some point soon and probably be developed. But to your direct question, no, the general plan does nothing to change the status of a Williamson Act contract.
Okay. And then we were talking about height. Does the city currently have height limits at all?
Yes, so the city's zoning ordinance currently has height limits. I can speak directly to the mixed-use zoning districts that are proposed to be increased. The height limit in the downtown is currently 75 feet. I don't know that we have anything close to that, but that's currently permitted. The West Gateway mixed use, which is kind of along 4th Street on the west side of town, past West Side Boulevard, headed out towards Graf, that allows, I believe, up to 50 feet currently in the zoning. Again, I don't know that we have anything close to that. And then the mixed use designation, which has a neighborhood mixed use zoning district affiliated with it, I believe is allowed up to 65 feet.
And so interestingly, those height limits are in keeping with the densities that we're now proposing. You probably would have never reached those height limits with lower densities, but we're essentially bringing the densities in conformance with the height limits you already have.
And then in the EIR report, there were some concerns, I guess, that were brought up about future groundwater supplies. What did that entail, or what were the findings on that?
I'm really glad I have Terry McCracken from our EIR team on the phone as well. I'm going to say a few words, mostly give Terry a chance to find the answer in writing. Eva, okay.
That one I don't know off the top of my head.
I don't know it off the top of my head either. I will say that by definition, what the EIR does is it does do an overall assessment of water supply versus water demand, and includes a series of calculations to ensure that at least at a planning level, we believe that there will be adequate water available to serve all of the urban development that is foreseen. Now, that's not necessarily like, we can go point at a water tank with the water in it today, but we can at least make a plan by which we believe that there will be adequate water supply for all the urbanization that's intended to occur. Terry, are you there, and can you add to that about groundwater resources in particular and water availability?
Yes, hi, I'm Terry McCracken with PlaceWorks. And is the question about groundwater supply, or is it about regeneration of groundwater, or is it contamination of groundwater? Because groundwater gets covered a lot in the EIR.
No, well, I was just going through the EIR report, and there were some concerns, and it was about future groundwater supply.
Chair Belong, is it specifically in a comment letter? Is that where you saw it, in one of the comments that was made? Or maybe you can point to a specific page if there is one that you're looking at.
This is in the EIR report that's given to us on our laptop here.
Yeah, but it still has page numbers at the bottom, probably.
I'm I'm not seeing a page number here. It's right before the wrap-up, and then it says next steps on your slides.
Oh, so you're talking about in the PowerPoint?
In the PowerPoint. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the PowerPoint is a summary of some of the comments received. So Terry, I think the chair is talking about a comment that's somewhere in the comments received on the draft EIR and responded to in the final EIR. He's referencing just a couple of words on a slide that don't specifically reference any content of the EIR itself. I don't know if you can find anything.
Right. So I guess where I'm going with this is that there was some concerns about future groundwater supply, and were there any findings of that?
What we have found in the EIR is that there will be adequate water supplies, not only from groundwater, but also conceivably from imported water and water conservation, but that those as a whole will meet the needs for water to serve urban development under the plan.
That's correct, yeah.
And then, I know you said it wasn't a major concern, but what was the cost of the general plan update? Is there a number on that?
I'm going to defer to Eva on that one.
I believe the total contract is about 2.4 million.
Okay, so the last 5 years, that was the cost to get this plan together.
Correct.
Yeah. And through the chair, I did not mean to say that those weren't important concerns. I just meant to say that they aren't strictly EIR concerns. They're not a concern about the environmental impact of the general plan.
Yeah.
I'm by no means saying they're not important comments.
And that's all the questions I have. I'll turn it back over to the fellow commissioners. Do you have any further questions?
Just one question for staff. On the height limit of the buildings, is that from ground to the top of the ceiling?
That's correct, yes. And just for everyone's knowledge, the heights are established in our zoning ordinance. That's not, the general plan is not quite that specific.
Okay, so the height is the tallest point of the building?
Correct.
Okay.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
Yeah, if I could say one thing before I take a seat, you do have before you a resolution for tonight's action, and I want to draw to your attention and the public that we made an omission in the resolution. There was one whereas clause that actually is semi-required by law. Putting this additional clause in will make you eligible for certain state funding for hazard mitigation planning. So we did add one paragraph. It's in purple on the middle of a page that I think you received tonight. So when you do take action tonight, we'll ask that you refer specifically to the revised resolution that you were given this evening. And it's different from the one in your packet only in respect to the addition of that one whereas paragraph about hazard mitigation funding.
And then would we need to also add in the motion to change LU 1.5?
No, that's already occurred, I believe. Eva, do you know that? The word from accept to approve?
I believe that's already changed.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
So we just need to be aware
It's
of
in
the
our-
whereas clause.
Recommendation, yeah.
Yeah, and you don't have to read it into the record. You just need to say we're approving the resolution that we received tonight, different from the one in the packet.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
We'll open it up for public comment at 7:09 p.m.
And
Chair, I just want to confirm we're opening the public hearing.
I'm sorry, we're opening public hearing at 7:09 p.m.
yes. And before you read any public speakers, I just want to, David mentioned a little bit in his presentation, but for the record, since the publication of the Planning Commission packet, we have received 3 written comments, which copies are available tonight and were given to the Planning Commission. One from Lee Shahinian, one from Alex Siwak, and one from San Benito County.
Yes, our first speaker is Lee Shahinian.
Members of the Planning Commission, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lee Shahinian. My topic this evening is why I think you should be concerned about the mixed-use density proposal in GP 2040. My family owns the 4.5 acres of vacant land in downtown Hollister on San Felipe Road between Maple and Santa Ana. In March 2021, the Hollister General Plan update team proposed changing the zoning for our property from Northgate Commercial to mixed use with a minimum density of 20 dwelling units per acre. That attracted Republic Urban Properties. In January 2022, they went into contract to purchase our property, designing a 92-unit infill project, including live-work units, which aligned with the city's housing requirements and their desire to keep Hollister residents in Hollister. Then, 15 months later, the new General Plan 2040 draft indicated required mixed use minimum density of 30 dwelling units per acre, a 50% increase, which made Republic Urban Properties plan no longer feasible because construction costs per unit are much higher for 30 dwelling units per acre. Appeals to the city changed nothing. Therefore, Republic Urban Properties abandoned their purchase contract with us and walked away from $350,000 in deposits. In the succeeding 14 months, John Schultz, vice president of CBRE, has discussed our property with dozens of qualified high-density developers, and all of them concluded that a density of 30 dwelling units per acre is not financially viable in Hollister. Finally, the Bay Area Building Industry Association has stated in writing that densities above 20 dwelling units per acre would be very difficult to develop in Hollister due to the high construction costs and consequent low market demand. While I fully agree with the City of Hollister that high-density housing is needed, the high-density zoning must work for developers as well. All the evidence I have cited indicates that a minimum density of 30 dwelling units per acre creates a barrier. If we want to see high-density housing, let's focus on finding a path to reinstate a minimum density of 20 dwelling units to the acre. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is A. Cywax, followed by John Roble.
Good evening, Commissioners. I appreciate you serving. It's hard to, so I've made some policy comments from 1.5, 1.6, and 1.7. I won't go over those. They're written. You don't need $2.4 million to justify and you to certify that it makes sense to build a 5-story building on 20 acres at one of the furthest corners from the center of town in an earthquake-prone area. It's just totally infeasible. And who was going to live in a 5-story building in Hollister? So that's something that it's impossible. The VMT mitigation is impossible. The biggest source of VMT is having to drive. People that'll live in a 5-story building are going to shop in the middle of town. The chances of that commercial center on the corner of Hillcrest and Fairview, who's going to develop that? Who's going to build a commercial center out there? There's barely any survival in the commercial centers in the middle of town. Look at what is that one on Tresapenas Road? It's empty. That whole parking lot and that building is vacant. So the VMT mitigations, all the thing that they want to push there is a mitigation tax. So apart from having to build out there where there's no transport, no public transport, there's now going to be on top of that a mitigation VMT fee. So I think 2 years ago, that area was slated to have 1 house per 5 acres. At a planning commission here about this time last year, it suddenly jumped to 60 units per acre, an uptick of 300 times the density. What thoughtful thinking went in 2 years ago to make it 1 house per 5 acres and suddenly flip to a factor of 300 to make it 60 units per acre? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is John Roble, followed by Bridget Bowman Thorpe.
Commissioners, I'm John Roble, resident of Hollister. I did participate in this planning situation some earlier on. Somehow I got out of the loop, and I'm a little not sure how all of this exactly works and how all of the various interactions have occurred through the company that's developing the EIR and the general plan and what have you. However, I'm really concerned about the fact that we haven't even talked about traffic tonight, and traffic is like, I think, one of the biggest complaints I personally have as I come and go and try to live my life. And that ties in not only with my time that I spend in my vehicle, but when I think about that, I think about the residents of Hollister who generally don't work here and spend 2 extra hours a day in their vehicles going from place to place. That in itself is one thing. We talked about vehicle miles traveled. At least it showed up on the screen kind of quickly and went by real quick. Vehicle miles traveled lead to pollution. And it's been said, I've heard anyway, that vehicles are providing the most greenhouse gases of all of the various different types of activities that happen. Messing with light bulbs in your houses and changing the street lights and stuff. These are like a very, very teeny tiny little percentage of greenhouse gas emissions. Our greenhouse gas emissions come from those people that are sitting in their cars 2 hours every day with their engine running and not going anywhere. That's where greenhouse gas emissions are coming from that we can do something about. How do we do something about that? We're talking a lot about housing and housing densities and blah, blah, blah. A lot. Where are we talking about developing commercial activity, bringing business, large business into town where folks can go to work here in town instead of being in their cars 2 hours driving to San Jose? When is it going to happen that we put some focus on bringing these large companies and putting people to work here in town as opposed to letting them go somewhere else or having them have to go somewhere else? They need to be able to generate funding income that's proportional to what their housing costs in order to be able to live here. High density housing is great. Again, 2 people per every high density house on the road going to San Jose every day. Let's fix that. Let's work on that somehow. I don't know what needs to happen or how it can be done, but you know, the answer to traffic is we've got to have 2 jobs for every new dwelling that we put. And if we're going to improve the traffic situation, we're going to have 2 jobs plus 1 to put some of those people off the roads into work in town as opposed to work in San Jose. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Bridget Bowman Thorpe, followed by Joe.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. I want to also make a comment on the traffic. I have a son who commutes every day to San Jose. He told me just yesterday that the traffic is now backed up from the roundabout all the way to the first intersection when you get out of town on 25 San Felipe at 4 a.m. I would advise you to get up at 3 a.m. in the morning and do the commutes 5 days a week. and see what it's like to be stuck for 2 to 3 hours in traffic. Right now, my son couldn't make it here to the meeting because he couldn't get on the on-ramp 101 to 25. He said it takes him 25 minutes from the on-ramp. You're basically parked on the shoulder on 101, just 25 minutes just to get on 25. That's the current condition of the traffic. It's insanity. And you, with your housing developments, you just make it worse. It's unlivable. I don't know if you went yesterday to the Highway 25 workshop at the Veterans Hall. They're going to do the EIR in 2 years. They're not going to do anything for 15 years. Nothing. It just stays at status quo, nothing. And yet you want to do a sphere of influence, do a huge land grab and build more houses. All I see is build, build, build. You make this town unlivable. That's all I have to say. And I mean, to do a land grab 0.5 to 1 mile outside the city. Have you driven on Fairview? They also go on Fairview. It's also clogged in the morning. You can't barely get out of town. Somebody just told me just to get from the Hollister to San Juan Bautista, it takes 1.5 hours now. And what if you have an accident? I mean, you have to put this into account. We cannot just build without infrastructure. I ask you, do not adopt the general plan as it is now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Joe, followed by Jace McQuivy.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'd like to start with a couple of questions regarding the environmental impact report. For starters, the question of how Hollister drivers behave, and I am one of them, though I've been kicking some nasty habits lately. Mostly one of them is, which is compensating for like things like speed bumps and stuff like that. You go slow down, right? People drive faster when they pass them. You know, that's just one of the things we like to do around here. And like I said, I'm trying to kick the habit, but it is something that has been noticeable. My parents have almost been hit almost. I think I've hit twice or 3 times, just walking down Beverly Road. People don't tend to stop as much as they did before. They tend to run through the stoplights, and actually they'll even drive faster down the cul-de-sacs like Cypress Street. They will drive faster, and it creates a more dangerous environment for everybody involved. So for future considerations, and probably even consideration with this impact report, is the question of not so much that the assumption that people just slow down wherever they go, but that perhaps they'll actually redistribute the places where people drive faster, such that where one place would have been 40 miles an hour, now it's down to 20, but the other place that would have been 20 is now 40. And that place where it might be 40 might be more biologically sensitive, so to speak, as in small children. I also have the question of course, future annexation. What will this do to county revenue? Does it have an impact on county revenue is a question of mine, and if so, is this included in the impact report? Say, for example, if there's less funding for firefighters or less funding for roads, basically, you guys are here for the city, but the question is, do the impacts that leak out into the county come back to the city in ways that we haven't projected yet? As for Commissioner Maizuni's question, we actually do not have, maybe there isn't a perfect actual exact study, but there is an analog we can use, which is the 9111 report for the Measure A. By 2035, they project about $250 deprivation, about $250 per acre in revenue. So let's just say cities are more complex. I don't really know all the variables involved. So let's just say insure yourselves against my ignorance. Let's say $1,000 per acre development would be deprived. That's $100 per tenth of an acre, which is about the size of a single house lot. There's also the question of potential damage to tourism. It would impact the viability of the general plan as a construct. I think that basically the question of economics and the economics of land use and the scarcity of land in and around the heart of San Benito County is the question is, I think that the economic impact should be considered in our environmental impact report because the two are not separate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jace McQuivy, followed by Bea Rosales. Our speaker is Bea Rosales.
Okay. I want to start by urging the Commission not to adopt this draft of the general plan. This document is supposed to be a blueprint of development that balances growth and quality of life, but this general plan will run our quality of life into the ground. Second, this climate action plan is not a plan at all. It has no substance. It would be generous to say it's even a concept of a plan. If we expect to mitigate the worst effects of climate change, this climate action plan needs to be improved dramatically. This doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of what needs to be done. Unfortunately, it seems that the people who are supposed to be thinking about our future are really thinking about something else. Because if this was really about creating a bright future for the next generation, we wouldn't be here talking about nothing. If you did care, you wouldn't adopt this general plan or climate inaction plan. So to those watching or reading this, please pay attention, take names, and vote accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is online, Jennifer Churchill, followed by Joe Tomasia.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Churchill, and I apologize for speaking earlier. I am a partial owner or whatever. My family owns the property that is designated by you guys to be a shopping center. As I mentioned earlier, Hillcrest and Fairview is where we are, and we have about 20 acres. We have been trying to develop this land for at least 10 years. We've run into so many different aspects and changes of development and changes of processes and so on. And I know that my father, Jim Churchill, has spoken and written to several of you and is very frustrated. So I get to be here tonight. And I want to tell you that the idea of changing our property to commercial feels extremely forced and almost bullied because it was mixed use before. And if you want mixed use, you could have a little shopping center and then you could put apartments on the top floor of that. That would take away from these 5-story buildings that you're planning on putting right next to this shopping center that is being forced. My opinion is my opinion. I was born in Hollister and I live in California, and I agree with 100% with what everybody has said so far. This plan is not worthy of being adopted. Much more work needs to be done. The environmental plan is very shallow, as was mentioned, and the idea of, of the Planning Commission telling people what they can and cannot do with their property that they've, gone for generation to generation. And as the other gentleman said, he lost out on his contract because of the change of plan that the 2040 plan is trying to implement. I'm extremely upset with the decisions that are coming out of this group. And I hope you can take a lot of this information into consideration when it comes to designating 5-story residential areas, forcing a shopping center on a side of town that may not even need it. And the transportation impact is huge. As was mentioned earlier, Fairview is already back to back. What do you think a shopping center is going to do there? It's going to make it worse. I think that's all I have to say. Again, I appreciate your time, and I know you're working hard on this, but I really want you to reconsider adopting this plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Joe Tanasha, followed by Julio Rodriguez.
Hello, my name is Joe Tanasha, resident of Hollister. Couple quick comments. A plan is a plan. You got to start somewhere. I'm not happy. I'm an agriculturalist. I've been dealing with traffic and problems for years. Development gets to be a problem. Maybe someday the city and the county, when they go to develop something, would consider talking to anybody that's in agriculture within half a mile of the development before it gets approved, so we can put our 2 cents in. I don't care if they build across the street from me, but don't affect my property. Currently, I got a roundabout on Santa Ana Road that makes no sense at all, except for the people on Santa Ana for the school making a U-turn. We can't even drive a tractor or truck and a trailer around it, and those kind of things. And the food safety issues of not having a fence put up by the developer and those kind of things. The developer has agreed, meeting with me to do it, but we should be involved in the development with the city planning on anything close to us, and the same with the county. Your traffic is not going to get solved without the county's involvement. Now, this agriculture one-to-one, I'll need some clarification sometime from somebody. Is that like property? Is it prime ground? Has to be prime ground, one-to-one? Is it like property? And then what are you going to do about these easements that are going to be out there, and they create an island in the sphere of influence, and then all of a sudden you're going to have an ag deal in the middle of houses around it? Or you're going to take all the best ground in the planning area is your prime ground, and I can go out anywhere I want, and the city will grow, and 50 years from now it'll be an island out there of farm ground. What are you going to do to protect those people that are trying to farm it? I understand the one for one. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to develop a damn thing if I could help it. But it's like today. I'm in the middle of a fight on a daily basis right next to the city limits. Today I'm driving down the road and somebody's walking their dog on my property. Dog takes the dump on the property. There's a crop there. I watched them to see if they'd pick it up. Do they pick it up? No. I had to turn around, get out of my truck with a bag, and tell them, hey, pick it up. Oh, we need to pick it up? This is a open ground. It's farm ground. Why would I need to be picking it up? We carry a bag with us when we pick it up. We pick it up in the neighborhoods. But they won't pick it up out there. They picked it up. But the mentality of the city and the people moving into it, and some of the people that are here, I'm tired of people taking away my rights. You want to develop your stuff, that's fine. But don't take my rights. And I'd like to get clarification sometime on one-to-one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Julio Rodriguez, followed by Carson Clower.
Hello. I think one of the biggest things about this general plan update, or this amendment, we should call it, was the fact that, we're paying for it. The taxpayers are paying for it. We're essentially subsidizing this amendment. I think it was almost $900,000. I take concern with that. We're subsidizing, people in this room, or people that this is an entitlement that people are going to be getting. Their land is going to exponentially increase. And we subsidize that entitlement process. We talk about economic development. Well, economic development for who? Who's prospering from this economic development? In July, I visited Mexico. The same thing happened in the early 90s. We talked about NAFTA, the trade agreement. Oh, Mexico's going to thrive, all this money. No. The people didn't become any richer, but the rich got richer. It's the same story here. The quality of life in the last, I would say, 30 years has diminished. And this sphere of influence, we know damn well it opens the door for more development and annexations. Let's not add, this is just a planning tool. No. This is the politics of land use. If any of you have read Ralph Nader's Politics of Land, you guys will know that this is an entitlement. The next process is more subdivisions. Let's not act like more subdivisions is not in the plan. Let's not act like people are like I said, granted, if this gets passed, people in this room are entitled to that. They're entitled to an annexation. They're entitled to this. So I urge this planning commission to deny it. Caltrans, they're not going to finish that Highway 25. So how, and the VMT, realistically, are we really do we really have a plan? And then, forgive me, I think the staff's done a great job in the sense, with the tool that they're given. But if we really care about the environment and the agricultural preservation, charging stations is not going to cut it. I'm sorry. Let's start with our land use decisions. Stop the urban sprawl. Why have we allowed us to sprawl out? Subdivision here, subdivision there. I empathize with the last person who spoke. I'm a teacher. Today, on Santa Ana Road, I came down, I saw these poor kids on Santa Ana Road. Here's a school. Walking on the sidewalk. Oh, there's the Brigantino house. No sidewalk right there. So the kid has to walk in the road. An abysmal planning job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Carson Clower, followed by Jim Churchill.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Carson Clower. I'm with K2 Solutions, and I really appreciate you guys reviewing this tonight and all the work that staff and both the consultant have done. I know you guys are half a decade on this and some big changes over the last year, so I appreciate all the work. It's not a perfect document. I could stand up here and probably punch 15, 20 holes in it, but at some point we kind of got to say, hey, we have a plan right now that's been out of date for a long time. To a certain effect, we're not even really using it because we're working on this new plan. So maybe I'm the only one up here today, but I'd like you to move forward with adopting it and getting it to the council and seeing if they have any changes that they'd like to see. So that's kind of the first thing. I do have a question, and there might not be a good answer for it, but my question is kind of how does the city's ag preservation policy interact with the county's ag preservation policy when you do have an annexation? Now, that's probably not an answer for tonight, but I do think it's something that's going to come up as applications get processed, because I think that what's proposed here is different from what's in the county. And then if it does move forward over the next couple months, I'd like to hopefully see some sort of implementation policy. The amount of work that's been put into this is immense. The amount of work that's going to go into implementing it is probably 10, 20 times more, which I'm sure staff isn't super excited about. But when you look at the number of new policies that have to go into effect, and a lot of them are very large, and there's going to need to be tracking and all these providing updates. If you read the document, the city's supposed to kind of provide updates on how it's moving toward the goals and policies in the document itself. As somebody who's kind of has a little bit of background in this from my past, I don't remember ever getting an update on the previous general plan and how we were meeting those goals. So that's something that I think would be important. And I don't know if that'll be your role or if that'll just be a council thing, is just making sure that staff or some sort of consultant comes back and provides you with regular updates on if you're getting anywhere near these policies, because the policies are only good if you actually implement them and you track them and you make people abide by them. So just to kind of summarize, I would appreciate approval on this, and hope you guys have a good night. Thanks.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jim Churchill online. Mr. Churchill, can you please press unmute?
Mr. Churchill, if you're on a phone, I believe it is either *9 or possibly *6 to unmute.
We do not have any more public comments.
I guess if Mr. Churchill gets on, then we can open it back up. But at this time, we'll close public comment. And we will open it up for the commission's discussion and deliberation. No comments? None? So there was a lot of public comments tonight, and so one thing I do want to address is that some of the things that were discussed tonight are out of our privy, I would assume, and it's unfortunate, some of the things that have happened within the community. I do myself commute every day, and I know what the commute is like, and I know what it can be, and so I do. We've heard all the comments, and and I do understand. The gentleman was asking about updates on progress within the general plan. Is that something that will be happening, or is it addressed in the plan in any way?
So there's a kind of a two-part question or a two-part answer I have for this. Annually, we do prepare a general plan annual progress report that is typically prepared in around March. It's due April 1st to the state, and that is a report on the policies and programs in the general plan. And we do that annually on our current general plan. The intent obviously would be to continue to comply with state law and report on this general plan. However, staff has worked with our consultant to make sure that we're set up for success in implementing the policies and actions, and really tried to keep them focused, remove duplication where one policy is in, let's say it's in the land use element, it's not repeated in the same or in a similar way. So it really is outlining a program for the city. So that's my first answer is yes, we do prepare an annual general progress report that gets taken before the city council for their consideration and then sent on to the state. The second part of my answer to this is staff is hoping to work on specifically a matrix of not only the general plan, but also the climate action plan, the hazard mitigation plan that was adopted, I believe, last February, which was part of PlaceWorks contract, but adopted separately, and really trying to gather all of these large planning documents that we have and establish a new baseline and have these matrices to guide staff, to guide potential developers, to help guide the council in developing strategic goals for annual 5-year plans, those types of things. So that is on our mind, and it's our hope to really lay out this general plan as how the city intends to move forward and take these policies and actions into place over the next 15 years.
Thank you. Does the commission have any other questions?
I'm assuming those plans are on the website that anybody can look at?
Yes, so the city's plans are all available. This item before you obviously is proposing to amend our current general plan. So this would take over for the general plan. The climate action plan would be a new planning document for the city. The local hazard mitigation plan was adopted as part of the county's multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan, but the city's is its own isolated, what's called an annex to that document. So that is available on our website. And then we would move forward through trying to implement, and then some of the actions, for example, are to update things like the Parks Master Plan. So as the city implements these actions, we would have more plans that have more specific details and kind of ongoing and upkeeping a real strategic goal set for the city through these planning documents and other documents that follow.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I did have one actually.
Okay.
Eva, there was an email sent out earlier, which I guess I would make public now, that I received from a Mr. Gomez. Is that something that we should have had printed up here to review and go over tonight? Or was that one of the letters that did not make it in time?
I do not believe that I received an email from Mr. Gomez. So the 3 emails that were provided to the planning department or to the general plan email, We have received copies. I can confirm if there was an additional email that was in our items, it will be compiled and we'll be editing the attachment for comment letters received with these 3 and anything else, but I am not aware of another email, unfortunately.
Okay, so then at this time, it would be inappropriate then to speak on said email?
You're welcome to speak about it, and then I would also ask that you forward it to staff and we can determine whether or not it should become part of the public record. But you're welcome to speak on it.
Did anyone else from the commission receive said email? Okay. Then I'll hold off.
Any further deliberation? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll second that.
Well, yeah, I'll entertain one. Would somebody like to make a motion?
All right, Mr. Chair, I think I see where you're coming from. Eva, do you have a PC number?
I could read you from the staff report. Staff's recommendation is option number 1 of the Planning Commission options available on page 2 of 3, which would be to adopt a resolution, which would be Resolution 2024-12, recommending to the City Council the certification of the final EIR, adoption of the 2040 General Plan, adoption of a Climate Action Plan, and adoption of a zoning amendment to incorporate Chapter 17.28 Agricultural Lands Preservation Program into the zoning ordinance with the findings contained in the draft resolution, with an amendment to add the additional whereas that was provided to the City Council tonight related to the incorporation of the multi-jurisdictional local hazard mitigation plan language.
So then you could just move to approve the motion read by the planning manager. You don't have to repeat everything that Eva just said.
Perfect. And that's all wrapped into one motion, correct?
Okay.
Correct. Tonight, the Planning Commission would make one resolution adopting that recommendation as a whole to the council.
Without reading it back, Mr. Chair, I would move to make a motion to pass Resolution 2024-12.
We have a motion on the floor.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion will carry. Move on to item 8.1, Planning Commissioners Reports. Oh.
Thank you all.
Are there any reports from the commission? Hearing none from the dais. 8.2, Planning Division Reports. Staff, do you have any reports?
I will just make a couple of brief statements just in relation to the item that we just had, but as a report, the intention of staff is to bring this forward, the general plan and our other items, for consideration by the City Council at the November 19th regular City Council meeting. So that will be beginning at 4 p.m. to discuss this item, and the Planning Commission has made a recommendation on that, so that'll be incorporated. And then I will also make a report, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but the Planning Commission bylaws that the Planning Commission considered a couple of months ago were taken to the City Council, and the City Council did adopt those changes that the Planning Commission made. I will make sure that you all get a copy of the final revised adoption, but the main change to that was changing our public hearing to allow an opportunity for the applicants of our projects to present their items to the Planning Commission during the public hearing and allow for an opportunity for questions before the rest of the public hearing proceeds. So giving a formalized opportunity for discussion with the applicant team, which was not previously allowed, but was kind of informally done often. And I don't believe I have any other reports, and my sidekick, Amber, is telling me that I haven't forgotten anything. So I believe that that is all.
Thank you. With no further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I make that motion to adjourn.
A second.
Okay, we have adjournment at 7:50 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
On the, oh, I guess not. Thank you. Thank you. I'll get better. I'll try.
Very good. Much better now.